I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the latest developments from CMHC and their CEO, Evan Siddall, has announced just recently that CMHC is going to further restrict the qualifications on getting an insured mortgage. Now, keep in mind, insured mortgages, this is what we call high ratio, less than 20% down. They're going to add another layer of qualification. From what I can read, it looks like it's going to take another 5, 8, 9% off affordability, which I've been warning you guys about for many years now, and I talked about this earlier in the year. They've been hinting at this for a while now, and I've been saying this for years as well, that getting qualified for a mortgage is not going to get any easier. It was never easy to begin with. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, getting qualified through a major Canadian lender was tough, as anyone who's gone through the process knows. And then they added that stress test, 2% stress test, which that really affected affordability. That took about 20 or 25% right off the top there. And now CMHC is going to add another layer. So let me make a few comments on this, because I've had a few people ask me, is this going to have a big impact on the Vancouver market? And I'll cut right to the chase here. No, not on the Vancouver market. It's not. Downtown Vancouver, east side, west side, I'll even go as far as, Richmond, Burnaby, surrounding areas. They won't have much of an impact because very few buyers in the lower mainland, and especially in Vancouver, are using high ratio financing. I've talked about this for quite a while now. The vast majority of buyers, I would say 90%, and I am privy to a lot of deals, both working on the buying side and on the listing side. The first thing I ask a realtor when I receive an offer is, where is your client at financially? How much is he putting down? He's pre-approved, obviously. But what is his down payment? I can tell you that 90% of all my deals the last 2 or 3 years are conventional mortgages. I can't remember representing a buyer, at least in the last couple of years, that didn't have a conventional mortgage, 20% down. And on the listing side, again, I think I've had a few deals, one in Richmond I remember last year. I had one out in New Westminster that I was the listing realtor on, that the buyer was putting down about 15%. So that's the first thing why it probably will not have a big impact here in the lower mainland or Vancouver, because most people are using conventional mortgages. It might have a bigger impact out in the Fraser Valley or other parts of Canada, where you can buy a one-bedroom condo for $175,000, or you can buy a two-bed for $350,000. Those will probably be more affected by this. But in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver for a decent one-bed, one-bath condo, you're looking at $640K up to $700K. If you want a detached starter home in Vancouver East Side, you're looking at about $1.5 million. West Side, $2 million and up. So these people are not using high ratio. But let me just comment on a few things here. Mr. Siddall, I don't know this guy, but it is a little bit of a strange situation. Now, he has been roasted on Twitter here, and for good reason. If you follow me on Twitter, I posted some articles here and some feedback on this. And I also posted my feedback on Twitter with this as well. The timing on this is fairly unusual, first off. We're still in the COVID-19 lockdown. And here he is, putting another restriction on CMHC. He's also gone on record here as well as saying that he sees the Canadian real estate market dropping between 8 and 18%. Now, he's very low on specifics here. It's very vague, doesn't give any cities or product type or condos versus detached. I guess it's just some sort of Canada-wide drop. And, he's taken some heat on that too, because I was reading that, the math he's using on those predictions is, a little different than what he should be using. I won't even get into that. But, this one guy summed it up in the Financial Post here, and I thought he put it quite well. He said, Mr. Siddall needs to stay in his lane. And I totally agree with that comment there. Here's the CEO of CMHC going on these tweet storms, talking about the market is overheated, and he's been saying this for years now, and that we have to do something about home prices, and making these predictions about where the market's going to go. Now, normally that is not something that the head of CMHC does. I can't think of any head of CMHC in the past that's ever come out with that. So I would have to agree with some of these commenters here and some of these financial analysts saying, you know, he should really be staying in his lane here with these predictions. On top of the fact that they're questioning his math, and I won't even get into that, the stats that he's using for this. But let me just point at a couple other things here. You know, yes, housing prices in Canada, well, especially in the big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, are expensive. And Mr. Siddall has gone on the record many times saying we need to do something to curb affordability. But doing another layer here of qualification and making it more difficult for buyers to buy a home, an insured mortgage home. So remember, again, this is high ratio financing. Again, not people that are putting down 20% or more, which kind of leaves out all of Vancouver. But again, as many of the pundits have pointed out here, you know, and I've said for many, many years now, you know, we're kind of saving some people from themselves. And here we are adding another layer to affordability for a first-time home buyer. Protecting them from, I just saw Royal Bank announcing a 5-year fixed rate at 1.99%. 1.99% is what it's come down to now as far as mortgage rates go. So they're protecting people, again, from buying an appreciating asset, buying a principal residence, getting off that renter's treadmill, which is going to devastate you financially in the long term. 1.99% interest rates, and the home is exempt from all capital gain. So it's the best tax, it's the only true tax shelter we get as Canadians. As I always point out, RRSPs are great, but remember, the tax man's going to come calling when you decide to draw that out. Protecting people from that, keeping them in this renter treadmill, but yet they do nothing about things like credit card debt at 20 and 25 and 30%. Loan shark type things. I just did a blog on it 6 weeks ago. That goes completely unchecked, but they're absolutely possessed and obsessed about keeping people out of the housing market. Now, listen, I know people, some of the newbies to my blog here, or some of the casual watchers here. If you've been a long-time subscriber to my channel here and you've read my book, you guys know my philosophies on buying and holding real estate, not trying to time the market. Buy your principal residence sooner rather than later. You cross a huge financial hurdle in life when you can do that and get out of that renter treadmill. I know some casual watchers here, or people that don't know me, don't know my business, where I come from, how I represent my clients, and the philosophies I pound home on my blog here and in my book, are going to say, yeah, this Bigland guy is a realtor. You know, of course he doesn't want to see more restrictions put down on mortgages because that, affects his business. Well, I can assure you, listen, this will have zero impact on my business, especially since most of my business is in Vancouver and the surrounding cities, where people are generally not using high ratio financing. But this will have no impact on my business. I've got more clients than I know what to do with, to be honest. I also, probably half my sales on the buying side are to investor clients. A big portion of my business is with investors. Half are principal residence buyers. The other half are investors. So I was tweeting on this and I posted a couple of articles as well. This type of thing that Mr. Siddall is putting here, I understand he wants to try and keep housing prices in check. But what he's really doing here is he's just perpetuating what I think the wealth divide, the haves and the have-nots. The rich and the wealthy and the homeowners and the landlords, they love this stuff. This is just going to make them more money down the road. So that's why I want you to understand where I'm coming from, an unbiased position here. I am a large property holder. As you guys know, I've got a large real estate portfolio. I've got many properties in downtown Vancouver, in Richmond. I've got lots of tenants. So, these type of things, these layers of restrictions that they keep putting on people, especially young millennials that are trying to get into their first home. This is music to the ears of a lot of investors like myself, landlords, large landlords. because this just keeps these people out of the housing market and keeps them in that rental market. That's why our tenant pool here in places like Vancouver and even in Richmond and Burnaby is so high. In downtown Vancouver now, the typical tenant I have is making six figures. That's how you can afford to pay $2,200 or $2,300 a month for a one bedroom. So, I've seen some chatter on Twitter and even, my core group of investor clients, this is music to their ears, this type of stuff. This is just perpetuating these good quality tenants, keeping them down and keeping them in that renter pool. That's all this is doing. And again, you're saving people from themselves, I've often said. Yes, are there people out there that are taking on too much debt, are reckless with credit? Absolutely. But most people are doing it right. And as I've often said, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to over-leverage yourself on buying a home in Canada, or especially in Vancouver, and going through one of the major banks. It is like running a gauntlet financially to try and get approved for a mortgage. Chances are in Vancouver, if you're buying a $700,000 one bed, the bank is going to want a conventional mortgage on that, 20% down. Plus you're going to need to provide them with 2 years of income, proof of your down payment funds. You're going to have a 675, 700, 750 beacon score minimum. Bank is going to probably want 2 income earners or a co-signer like your parents. It is incredibly difficult. You add to that the 2% stress test a couple of years ago. It is, it's crazy. Yes, some people might over leverage themselves, but it's usually because of, things like credit card debt at 20 and 25 and 30%. These credit card debts, interest rates have been on a steady decline down to zero the last 10 years. Yet the credit cards, they're actually raising their interest rates. I told you the story about my wife. We don't ever keep balances. My Visa is at 20%. Of course, I've never carried a balance. My wife got a letter on her TD card a couple of months ago saying we're raising your interest rate from 19.9 to 24.9. Interest rates are going down, but they're raising them. But Mr. Siddall doesn't talk anything about loan shark credit card debt. He's paranoid about keeping people out at 1.99%, taking advantage of leverage, principal residence exemption, and getting out of the renter treadmill. We are so backwards in this country. It's unbelievable. But again, if you think I'm against this because I'm a realtor, again, you're wrong. This is music to my ears as an investor. This just keeps the profits going, is all it does. Keeps those rental rates increasing and just increases the quality of that rental pool, which is already off the charts. As I say, most of my tenants in downtown Vancouver are in tech. They're lawyers, young doctors. I've got upper level management. In Richmond, different price demographic there, but again, it's management people, highly skilled tradespeople earning $70,000, $80,000 a year. Those are my tenants. These are the people that should be getting into the housing market, but we're just adding more layers. But again, not going to have a huge impact here in places like downtown Vancouver, east side, west side, or even the surrounding suburbs. Because again, even out in Vancouver, in Richmond, I think about the lowest price unit I would recommend to someone might be around $350. There's some good older wood frame buildings near SkyTrain. They're going to need a reno and they're 35 years old. But even there on those, the banks are going to want at least 10 to 15% down, maybe, but most of them are putting in conventional mortgage 20%. And for good reason. Avoid that CMHC insurance. It's expensive. They pad it into your mortgage payments, but it's extremely expensive. Final little kicker here, just came across the wire the other day, is that it turns out Genworth, who is the other major insurer in Canada, they're not going to go along with CMHC's new requirements. They're going to keep it the way it is because they said that we're happy with the way the qualifying is now, and the banks are doing a fantastic job, which they are. They're the gatekeeper here. The banks, with their stress test and how difficult it is, that's all the protection you need. And that's why foreclosures in Canada, I'm going to do a blog on this, and I've mentioned it many times, foreclosures are as rare as hen's teeth here in Vancouver and in BC. I saw some joker saying that, posting some article saying that foreclosures could double after we get out of the COVID thing. Well, that might happen. But when foreclosures are running at a fraction of 1%, which is what they are, if they double, well, hey, we're at half of 1%. And most foreclosures are a result of levies, I find, in the strata. That's what causes most foreclosures. You know, just the final thing I'll leave you with here. In the Financial Post, this Mr. Siddall here, he's saying some strange things here, and I'm not going to get too much into it, but he had some synopsis here that he painted about, prices are too high and, Canadians are on the brink, and sure, some of them are. But he had some synopsis here that he threw out that didn't make any sense to me. He goes, you could have a homeowner that puts 5% down on a $300,000 home. Well, first little caveat here, that wouldn't be in Vancouver. You're not buying a $300,000 home in Vancouver. There's nothing at that price. As a matter of fact, there's nothing under $500,000, and that would be leasehold land or co-op. So exclude Vancouver and the Lower Mainland from his little scenario here. The buyer puts 5% down on a $300,000 home, let's call it in Saskatchewan. Prices could go down in the next 18 months by 10%. That buyer could be looking at a loss of $45,000. So I guess 10% is 30, but I guess he's including the real estate commissions if the guy had to sell. So $45,000. Yeah, Mr. Siddall, that's what would happen, all right. Boy, that's very enlightening. So exactly, but what point is he trying to make there? If you've been watching my blog for years now, I've said that prices, you buy a home in Vancouver, it's not going to go up in a straight line. It's a coin toss. I've been buying real estate in Vancouver for over 33 years now, and I've done many blogs on this. Half the homes I've bought, half of them, and I bought a lot of homes, detached, condos, townhomes, has been worth less than what I paid for it at some point. Half. Half the ones I bought them, they've gone up. Yeah, there's been corrections along the way, but they've never gotten below what I paid for. That's the half. The other half, though, I've bought, and at some point, usually within the first few years, it's worth less than what I paid for it. That's just the way real estate works. That's the way the stock market works. You pull the trigger on some shares today, good chance that in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be, or even a year or two from now, it's worth less than what you paid for it. But why would that be a concern for you? If you're a homeowner, it's a 20, 30, 40-year need. Why are you selling it? The loss is only on paper here. So I don't understand his scenario, and I wasn't the only one. Again, he got lambasted on social media for this thing. Doesn't make any sense. As I've often said here, homeownership is a long-term need. You should be, if you're pulling the trigger on a home, you need to be able to keep it for 8 to 10 years, minimum. That will solve all your problems and guarantee capital gain. I've said the longest time I've ever held a property where it was worth less than what I paid for it was 6 years. It was a brand new townhouse in Terra Nova in Richmond about 24 years ago. After year 7, it got above what I paid for it, and it never looked back from that point on. It's worth about 250 to 300% more than what I paid for it back then. But I don't even know what his scenario is. When you're buying a home, you're not speculating. You're buying a principal residence to live in. It's a roof over your head. You should never be in a position where you're buying a house and be forced to sell it in 12 or 18 months like his scenario was here. I've gone on this so many times. Have a backup plan. If you've got to move or take a job and the market's down, put a tenant in and rent it for a year until the market recovers, which it always will. So it's not going to have a huge impact on the Vancouver market. And again, the bottom line is here, I just don't understand here why they're protecting people, at 1.99% interest rates, but things like credit cards go unchecked. We're really living in a backward world here. But it's the other thing that I've been stressing for how long now here on my blog. If you're a young person watching my blog here, again, you should be possessed in trying to buy your principal residence. If you can, milk it for all you're worth living at home. Live in your parents' basement. Try and stay there as long as you can to save the down payment. Move out into the utility shed if you have to and put a space heater out there. Anything to try and save that money to get in, to get the down payment. Because once you've got the down payment, it's smooth sailing after that. If you're currently renting and paying $2,100 or $2,200 a month, Your top priority right now should be saving as much as you can to get that down payment, to get into the market. You've crossed a huge financial hurdle, as I said, because again, as I've been stressing here, it's not going to get any easier. Not when you've got guys like Evan Siddall here, who wants to protect you from yourself, some people. Get into the market sooner rather than later. Don't worry about, he might be very well right that prices drop 10 or 12% in the next year. I've been saying that forever. Market doesn't go up in a straight line. With the whole pandemic thing here, and we're headed into a recession, I don't know what to expect, to be honest, but for sure, homes could very well drop 10% or 15% over the next couple of years. But I would not let that bother you one bit. Buy your home, live in it, enjoy it, keep it for 10, 15, 20 years, and you're going to be blown away by the capital gain you're going to get on that. And for sure, get out of that renter treadmill. But again, this type of thing just keeps those people in the renter treadmill. It's frustrating. And a lot of people just don't understand. That wealth gap is just going to get wider and wider when you keep adding these type of restrictions to well-qualified young buyers that are trying to get into their first home. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.